welcome everybody, guys. We're quite excited today because it's our first event. So it's the first event of UnimAI. So we basically know each other quite well, but this is the first event in order to make some others event from September on and to be even more active and to make more connection. Before starting and presenting the guests, I want to make a disclaimer. So this is not a lecture, obviously. So I invite you to be active, to make questions, to even join the conversation to enrich it, or otherwise to, if you think this is going to be boring, to stand up when you're done and get out. This is also feedback for us. I mean, so very freely. This is basically a chat, not more. So today's guests for the first data talk are Emanuele Guidotti and Professor Alfio Ferrara. Some of you, I think all of you know Professor Ferrara for the coding exam. And most of you will know Emanuele Guidotti, but then we will introduce them. And so we are Leonardo and Michela.
Hi guys, thank you for coming.
And so we can start by asking our special guests what's their path to tell us more about what they did, because they come from very heterogeneous and particular path. So it can be useful also for us because we all come from very different streets. And so starting maybe from Emanuele, he can tell us something more.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to be here. So yes, I started studying physics actually at the University of Milano, Via Celoria. And then I moved. I started my master in economics and finance here at the University of Milano, and then I decided to start a PhD in finance in Switzerland. And for me, the choice was really during my bachelor, at the end of my bachelor, to decide what to do essentially of my life afterwards. And I realized that, I mean, I loved physics, don't get me wrong, but I was mostly interested in astrophysics. And during the open days and, this kind of meetings where they tell you how your life would look like in the future as an astrophysicist, they were basically saying that the biggest observatories or positions are all over the world, and especially in South America, for example, or quite far away from here. And that was really something that I did not like. And another thing that I was really liking during my bachelor studies was to apply what I was studying in physics to financial markets. So to understand as far as possible, let's say, the dynamic of prices. And this led me to start actually the master in finance. Before that, I was kind of looking to understand more of what I could do during the master, and I took a quantitative path, so it's quantitative finance. And I really liked the choice, actually. And during the quantitative finance master, we had plenty of courses in, it was like 5-6 years ago. It was already quite a lot intensive on the data science aspects and the classification algorithms and so on and so forth. So that's really, I really like, something I really like. And I never gave up, even during my PhD studies, to continue this journey into an intersection of finance and data science and artificial intelligence. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. So yeah, my story is a bit longer because I think I'm definitely the oldest person in the room. So okay, I have some mixed feelings about that, but right. Yeah, when I got my degree in Italy, there wasn't this distinction between bachelor and master. So basically, there was only one course in 5 years, corresponding more or less to the master degree nowadays. And my master degree, so to speak, was about philosophy, and in particular, the history of the Middle Ages philosophy. But I did my thesis on the automatic analysis of the text. So it was a little bit strange or weird also for the standards of the history of philosophy. It was about Bonaventura di Bagnoregio for who could be interested in the topic. And it was about the automatic detection of metaphors in text. And of course, the techniques for text analysis at that time were more or less corpus linguistics, frequency of words, that kind of stuff. I got very excited about this stuff and using the computer and algorithms for doing that kind of measures. And so I decided to start with a master, the professional master, I mean. At that time, there was this professional master organized between the Department of Philosophy and the Department of Computer Science. And so through that master, I discovered the computer science department. I started working there in the area of databases, basically. I got some funding for a little research before starting the PhD, and then PhD in computer science. And then PhD, researcher, associate professor, full professor, the same, the story, okay, in computer science. The original activity for me was in the area of databases, basically. And databases, knowledge management, knowledge design, ontologies. Back in the 2010 or something, it was the popular topic, the hot topic. And then, yeah, from this semantic web stuff, I started recovering the activities on analysis of text. And then, better than me, that there was the revolution of machine learning, also in the area of natural language processing. And so that's my research now, basically. And that's the story, a little bit strange. But if I can say something about that, I think that it's very difficult when you have a switch in your path, when you come from a different experience and then you have to switch to another topic or maybe other. It's a little bit difficult because you have to study a lot. But if you do that, it's very nice to have this background. I really like it because I think it's very good to have some different perspective on things. And so maybe one thing I like of this course in data science is that every one of you is a different path, basically. And so I think it's very interesting also for you to stay in this community, right? And so that's also my experience somehow.
Okay, thank you. We would also like to ask both of you, since both of you come from a different background, really different. What is the reason that led you to decide exactly this kind of path for yourself?
I think I already kind of answered this question. So for me, it was really like the life that I was expecting after my studies.
Well, as I said, I was really fascinated by the fact that analyzing the data, you may discover things. I don't really know how to describe it, but for me, is every time you build some kind of techniques and you discover something new, is a sort of exciting. So yeah, probably the driver was the data. Yeah, the fact that the data can contain information and you can find a way to extract this kind of knowledge from there and discover new things. It's very related to this feeling of satisfaction that you have when you explore something and you discover something new. Yeah, that was my real motivation, probably.
Yeah, I may feel sorry to ask it after your introduction on the age of the participant, but when did you got the degree? I mean, the question is, how was the
next one is how old am I? Right?
No. I mean, the question was, how was the state of technology? I mean, calculators,
Um,
computers.
For me, it was back in 2000, exactly 2000. And well, the state of technology was really changing, because you have to think of the fact that until the end of the 90s, internet was a new thing. Okay, so I know that it's very strange to imagine that word, but it was like that. So the World Wide Web was more or less something new. In the beginning of the 2000s, there was the dot-com economy, something that now is in the very past. So it was very different. Also, the data revolution was not a thing at the time, because yeah, there were already a lot of research on data analysis and that kind of stuff. But the real big issue was after some years, I think 2005 or something like that, with the social networking, basically, where we were overflowed by the data, and the people start thinking about using this data to do something. And so, yes, at the very beginning, at my time, my first topic was data integration, basically. And then, as I told you, in 2010 or something, there was this big interest in ontologies, semantic web, adding semantics to data, more than discovering semantics from data. After that period, probably the machine learning changed the things a little bit. People start thinking about not to design the knowledge, but to try to understand that from the data. So,
Did you imagine all the boom that the NLP had, or also in this most recent years? So did you guess it right, or did you find this revolution that crossed you basically after your choice?
that's an interesting question, because when I was working on ontologies, back in the time, I had the feeling that that kind of interest in ontologies and knowledge design was a little bit maybe overrated at that time, even if it's still important. I don't want to say no to that. But concerning the machine learning, no, I think it was unexpected for everybody, more or less. But now I don't have personally the feeling that it's overrated. Okay, I think it's the real new thing. But no, it was completely by chance that I was working on NLP in the right moment, if you want. Maybe even a bit late, because there are people working on these topics from many more years than me. So
Yeah, I think I'm a bit too young to answer this question, in the sense that when I mean, first knew about NLP or something, it was in this university 6-7 years ago. So, I mean, when you study something on the books at the university, I mean, at least for me, it's something it's like it has ever existed and been that way for ages, right? So I didn't have really the maturity or whatever to understand or predict the possible outcomes in the very next years. So for me, it was honestly unexpected, because I don't have that experience. I think I'm too young for that.
We would like also to ask you what's your biggest success in your career, and at the same time your biggest failure in your life career.
So first, I mean, so far I don't think I wouldn't call mine a career. So I mean, I studied, then I had my bachelor, my master. I worked for a startup, freelancer, and did some projects, and then I started my PhD. So the way I see my life now is really, I mean, I love what I'm doing. I do not really care about my career in this sense so far. So in this sense, my biggest achievement is a bit hard to say. I can tell you what I'm most proud of, in a sense, is that during the COVID pandemic, I developed, some of you may know, a platform to aggregate COVID data all around the world. And this platform then has received some attention from the scientific community the data has been used by the scientific community, downloaded over 6 million times, and also the paper actually it went in a good journal in Nature's Scientific Data. So that's something I'm proud of, because I feel I could give my little contribution to this world. And the biggest failure, again, is something very difficult. So I'm very lucky so far, because I can say I have no regrets so far. So it's very hard to say. I mean, you fail every day, right? You try something, it doesn't work. You try something else, it doesn't work. You apply for a position, it doesn't work. But then eventually it always works out in one way or another. And I think that, I mean, if you look it in an optimistic way, you can say, look, the final outcome was the best outcome, right? Nobody can prove you wrong. So yeah, I don't have one big failure in mind.
So even Emanuele Guidotti gets rejected from companies. That's right.
Yes,
So
many
guys,
times.
I mean,
Rejection at conference is not a failure at every time. It happens every time. I mean, it's, now there is a big competition about publishing. So it's pretty, yeah.
You said in companies.
I know in companies you said, sorry. But I thought was thinking about conferences. No, yeah, no, I don't know. But no, well, it's difficult to answer because I try not to think in terms of achievements or failures, because it looks like you are at the end of the story, No, maybe it's better not to think too much about that. But if I want to say, well, maybe in terms of success, I think a couple of things. The first one, when I started studying in the university, I had this idea that I would like to be a professor one day and doing research for a living, right? And then that's something I achieved, so I'm happy. That's one thing. And the other thing is, I know it looks like a little bit ad hoc answer, but I would say that this data science group that we created here, not only with the course on data science and economics, but with the research center we have a master, and more importantly, we have a group of other teachers and professors, researchers, students that are here in UnimAI are around the topic of data science. It's a very nice group. The atmosphere is very nice. And since I contributed to create this, because I was one of the founders of the data science DSE course, I think it's a success. At least I perceive it as a success. Concerning the failures, it's not exactly a failure, but my big frustrations is that I think I'm a very curious person. I would like to do basically everything, to stay in every project, to work on everything, and I don't have the time to do that. So my real failure is that I'm not very capable of managing my time, and so it's quite frequent for me, the feeling of having not the time I would like to have to do everything, So it's not exactly a failure, but it's my biggest frustration, if you want. But fortunately, yeah, maybe it was lucky. I was lucky, but also for me, I don't have a big thing that I consider a failure, a single failure. Okay.
Okay, now we would like to ask you, like, coming back on your career, what are like the difficulties that you actually encountered during your path? Like in terms of maybe Professor Ferrara actually starting coding, coming from philosophy, or Emanuele to like coming from another degree. What are the difficulties you encountered during this path, and what did you do to actually try to improve yourself and to like to I don't remember the word in English, but I mean that's the overcome difficulties.
Okay, that's a very good question, because actually I'm right now in that situation. So far I haven't faced so much challenges. I was coming from physics, then finance. So I'm now facing these challenges because people from finance look at you as a physicist or computer scientist, and people from computer science look at you like a finance guy. So actually you are not really fitting any position. So that's, I mean, I have no answer. And how do I overcome this? Still, I don't know. I hope sooner or later I will figure it out. So far, what I'm convinced of is that I should keep going the way I like. So I mean, I should keep going in the direction that I like. So if I like doing interdisciplinary research in this moment, I should continue to do that. And sooner or later, some opportunities will open up that will look for exactly that position. This is something I hope, but of course, I'm not sure. So probably, Alfio, you have better suggestions and experience than me.
I don't know. But I would say a couple of things. The first one, in terms of difficulties or tasks that were difficult for me. Well, in the very beginning, coming from background in the humanities, the main difficulties were about the background, basically, especially on the scientific side, on mathematics and the basics. And well, it was difficult in the sense that during my PhD, as I worked a lot, really a lot. And of course, the other problem is that, well, but overcoming the kind of difficulties is pretty easy because the answer is you have to study more. It's up to you, you know. Maybe it could be hard sometimes, but if you really want to do that because you like it and so on, it's not so real issue, I think. The other thing it was mentioning by Emanuele is right. It's a more complex issue because we are in a system that sometimes is not really ready for the notion of interdisciplinarity. Okay, in under different perspectives. The first one is it's if you do an interdisciplinary work, the first issue is where are you going to publish this? Because every discipline, every course, every PhD course, every faculty has their own specific kind of journals or conferences. And it's very difficult for someone who's doing a real interdisciplinary work to find the right place where to publish their work. That's an issue. Another issue that sometimes the system is a little bit rigid with respect to this topic. So it's not very open to the people working into the interdisciplinary field. But first, the things are changing pretty quickly because the diffusion of some of the techniques that we study here, like machine learning, like data analytics and that kind of stuff are slightly changing this situation because basically these kind of techniques of data science are almost everywhere in any discipline. So the people are opening a little bit about new contributions from other fields. For example, in the humanities, when I started doing that analysis of the text and so on, it was a very strange thing to do. Nowadays is more common. So the things are changing pretty quickly. Also in the computer science, for example, in the very beginning, computer science was a very specific thing. And the people in that sector were not sometimes so open to others. And now it's changing a lot because we have bioinformatics, informatics applied to finance, to social sciences, and also the departments of computer science now have more people working in these areas. So I think that this is a problem that probably will not, hopefully, will not be a problem anymore in 10 years now, right? So my suggestion is go on your path and what you are looking for and the kind of interest you have, and try not to think in terms of disciplines and this kind of rigid way of organizing the knowledge.
Of course, we'll look into our left because we're guests, but I try to look at you the most possible. So again, if you have some observation question, I'm looking forward to hear from you. Before moving on to the paper you published at NeurIPS, then you will explain us what's NeurIPS and how is it important, because a lot of us don't know it. So maybe it could be even a good starting point for someone else to publish in the future something else at NeurIPS. Before moving on, I wanted to deal with a problem that maybe you just mentioned, but for example, Prof, you were saying in your PhD you studied a lot to close all the gaps that you maybe had from philosophy, etc. And also even Emanuele, even if in his, he doesn't call his path a career, but I mean, you had to work a lot to achieve a lot of things. How did you find, I mean, did you find easy to manage the work and to balance it with your life? I think this is a question that will for sure interest us in some years. For sure, maybe even now, someone of us are interested in this.
I can say one thing. I'm a little bit a workaholic person. Okay, so my answer is I work all the time. Yeah, but after a while, the balancing, you find your way. Okay, I think there's no recipe that you can use for everyone. Everyone has his own way of balancing personal life, working, and stuff. To tell the truth, one of the reasons I work a lot is the fact that I don't see it as a work. The point is that if you are doing something because you want to go there, but you're not really interested in the path, that's a real work. It's usually difficult to do, is hard to do. You have to do a lot of effort, and you are happy only when you reach the destination. But if you like the path, the destination is not so important. I usually don't think about what I'm going. I'm more focused on what I'm doing for working in that direction. Okay, so for example, I try to study the topics that I didn't know back in the time in my PhD. I used to go to the university courses to see how they are, maybe in different disciplines.
Like Steve Jobs.
Really, I didn't know that, but anyway, it was fun for me. It was interesting. I like it, and so yeah, it's not so difficult,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So actually, if I should choose, was it hard or easy? It was very easy. If you do something because you're passionate about it and you enjoy the journey, then it's very easy. Actually, it's fun. So I had a lot more fun switching than probably going on the straight line.
Maybe before the starting to ask you the questions that some of the students uploaded on our forum, I think Leonardo would like to ask you a question, a particular one.
Actually, too, I got one more after Professor Ferrara introduction. What did Bonaventura da Bagnoregio write about?
a lot of things, but the book I worked on was called Itinerarium Mentis in Deum, and it was basically about the way the people, well, the middle-aged philosophers used to talk about God, but they were not talking really about God. They were talking about their world and the way the people think by the metaphor of God. Okay, not exactly the metaphor, but yeah. And so that book in particular was about the knowledge, how the people understand things by perception, then by reasoning on that, and so on. And there was a lot of metaphors inside. The kind of language of Bonaventura is really metaphoric. There is a lot of metaphors about, my thesis in particular was about the metaphors of the Enlightenment that he uses a lot. And about the notion of truthness that is in the book. So that's the topic of Bonaventura. Yeah, it's philosophy.
Again, after moving, before moving to NeurIPS, we wanted to ask you, let's say, a kind of question that maybe is asked in some company interview, some weird company interview. If you, Emanuele, was a superhero, which kind of superpower would you like to have? And if you, Professor Ferrara, if you would be a supervillain instead, which kind of superpower would you like to have?
It's a bit tough, but I think I would like to control time so that, I mean, if you are able to do that, you can basically do anything, right? So I would like to do that.
Sorry, I think Professor Ferrara would be really happy to control time too, right?
Already said why my choice. So
There's a constraint. Yeah.
I mean,
Superhero and supervillain can have the same power.
it's pretty obvious that we have a problem with time. Okay, so that's pretty obvious. So since the time is your stuff, what can I say? I don't know. The superpower for the supervillain should be something evil, right? I don't know. I don't really know. Yeah, the time was so good. That's why.
We actually imagined that you could shot some ray gun from your rings.
From something like that. Yeah, yeah. There could be an option, yes, but I don't know if it's really useful. No, maybe that's a good idea. It's a way of using the power of time without having the power of time. So being like Flash that can do everything very, very fast, which is another way to stop the time, right? If I move really fast, you are the physics here, so you're better than me.
But as far as I know, you can go back in time. I could.
I don't want to. Okay, I accept not to go back in time, but I want to move very fast. Okay, reading very fast, doing everything very fast. So
well, it's maybe the perfect plot for a good end of a film. So the superhero can do a bit more than the supervillain, so you can defeat him. I have one question about your rings, actually. Do they have, especially this one, because I don't know, I got really stuck from this when you were at lecture. So, yeah, I mean, it caught my attention. So does it have some special value for you, and how much does it weigh?
Oh, this one is very light. No, I like very much the rings in general, and there are some meanings. This one are from my grandparents. They were a couple, and they died now. So this one was my buying. This one and this one, they come from my girlfriend, and this one was from my father. So there is a sort of meaning, yes. But it's about the weight. When you used to put rings on the fingers, then it's normal to have them. If you don't have them, you're like, it's a strange feeling, So for me, it's obvious to have them.
I kind of understand the same feeling. When you don't have them, you feel like you don't wear anything in your fingers. Okay, thank you. Now I think we can now ask the questions. Yeah.
We would like, as we said, to ask you more about what you did at NeurIPS, what you did to being published and present your paper classification with Born's rule at NeurIPS, and maybe explain us also what is NeurIPS.
Start? Okay, so I will start with the funny story, because I'm very happy to talk about Born's classifier here, because actually the very initial idea came out from an exam that we did to, I don't remember which student, how many years ago? Yeah, or more, before the COVID, I think, right? So there was this, at the end of my project, my course. Oh, the story starts a little bit earlier. So that year, the course on text mining, the two lecturers were me and Emanuele for the first part. And after the course, I usually ask the students, as you probably know, to do a project. And one of those projects, it was completely different story than Born. But we discussing the project, we started having some ideas. And then this discussion was growing and growing and growing until we thought that maybe we have something to work on. And so we started working on that, and the first version was completely different from that one. We tried to publish it in NeurIPS, but it was rejected. And so we understood very much from the reviews we received what was good and what is not. And so we started working again on that. And yeah, and finally we published the paper. It was accepted after a lot of work. But it's interesting because that idea came out from this place, you know, and so it's a proof of one thing that I really like about the university, the fact that the teaching and the research are not two different things. You can do both together, and you do a better teaching if you do research and you present something from your research during the courses, and you can do even a better research if you take something from the teaching experience. And so I think Born is many things for us, let's say, but it's also 3 years of work. But it's also this kind of specific experience to me, the fact that teaching and research can, you know, feeding one and the other. And so that's the part of the creative story. Let's say the experience of NeurIPS.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same for me. I can maybe add just a couple of things. I mean, actually, the first version of this algorithm was completely different. And actually, it was like an old project. I mean, even before starting the course with Alfio, I had like a small startup. I was doing some projects where the goal was to classify events. So that's why we started original from actually classification of events. So events like you have the venue, the time, and so on and so forth. You should understand which kind of event is it. Is it like, I don't know, music, board games, or whatever. And yeah, I was work. And then after that, I had this opportunity to teach with you the course, and it was really a very, very nice experience. So it was really enjoyable for me. And at the exam, we had this conversation and so on and so forth. And actually, we started from something very, very different, as taking also some ideas for that exam. And then we tried to submit before NeurIPS. Actually, I think we tried the ICML. And let's say that we like the feedback. It was rejected from ICML. Again, you see many rejections. And then NeurIPS, it was rejected again. But I think we were very, very happy of the rejection of NeurIPS the first time, because we really could see why. So I really have to say the reviews were done in a very, very, in an excellent way. So we were able to understand the potential of the work, what was not going in the right direction, what was actually going in the right direction. So we put, again, an additional year on the work, and we focused on really the added value of the algorithm. And then the next year it was accepted with 4 out of 4 full accepts. So that's really the journey. And especially for me, that I mean, I was doing my PhD, so it was really an excellent opportunity to learn how actually the review and the peer review process work, and how long actually it takes from the original idea, all the changes that are required until the final publication in this case. Or yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more of what is NeurIPS?
Oh yeah. NeurIPS is a conference, a big one. It's one of the most important conferences in machine learning and artificial intelligence, particularly on machine learning. It's a long story, and many of the most cited and important papers that you can read about machine learning have been published there. There are 2 or 3 venues there, ACML and some, more or less this one. The experience is, if you go there, it's a huge conference. It was 5,000 people or something.
It's in the States, right?
That year was in the United States, yes, in New Orleans. So yeah, in this big, gigantic, huge conference center with a lot of people. The presentations, the keynotes, and also the other works are super exciting. And my suggestion, if you are interested in machine learning, one thing you should do every year is to check the proceedings of NeurIPS and take the papers that you are interested in or they are on your topics, because there are many topics, and read at least those papers, because basically it's the standard, okay? So it's the real things that is up to date. And of course, if you like machine learning, being there is like, a sort of amusement park or something. It's a sort of very nice experience when you can talk with people. Yeah, it's a nice experience and a very important conference.
And now to close this argument, I want to try to do something like asking ChatGPT, but human. Can you describe Born rule classification in 2-3 sentences?
I'll try. So it's a classification algorithm inspired to principle of quantum physics. So, like naive Bayes, usually basic principle from classical probability theory. And we essentially use basic principle from the way quantum systems behave to achieve a classification outcome. And then the advantage of doing this actually, we tried that at the beginning for curiosity, and we just realized that it was working pretty well. And that also has some advantages, like, for example, it has an intrinsic explanation of the classification results, because you're using something that more or less happens in nature, right? And so there is a large literature on how these things are explained in terms of all physical laws. Of course, this goes well beyond what we're doing. What we propose is a classification algorithm, and then we try to exploit this interpretability to bring it to the machine learning community. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a new kind of mapping input to outputs that is new from the computer science perspective, but it's very, very old from the physics perspective.
We will post a link to the paper in, all the groups and social and etc.
We now then can ask the students questions. Like the first one is, why to be a data expert in the era of AI?
Well, that's a very good question. And a couple of weeks ago, I think, or 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was invited to this discussion at the Polytechnic of Milano about ChatGPT. And one of the issue was, okay, is natural language processing research almost finished? Since we have models, huge models that can do everything, basically. Or another question that you always hear and there is, okay, we have general artificial intelligence systems that do almost everything. So what you are going to do? Well, the answer, I think, is basically, first of all, it's always when you use something out of the shelf in your work, you should know what they do. Okay, so that's our first thing. The second thing is that there is already a lot of literature about the possible biases or the possible problems that these kind of technologies may arise. And that's a completely new field in a way. And I think it's one of the field of the future. So one of the problems in the future will be not to create the best classifier because we already have ChatGPT, but to see if the classification, for example, is biased or if you can trust the output of the system. That's a couple of questions that nobody has an answer at the moment. And so that's a big issue, I think, in the field. And then in the real thing, my personal feeling is that if you go in a company, it's very difficult to find a situation where you take the huge model, you apply it as is to the problem, and the problem is solved. Okay, there is always needed of something in the middle, and this something in the middle is your capability of interacting with the technologies on one side and with the tasks that you have to deal with on the other side. Okay, that's true also for other technologies in the past. That didn't solve completely a problem, but still need some kind of mediation in the middle between the usage of the technology and the production of the technology. But for sure, these kind of models will change the research more in the direction of how to use it than in the direction how to build them. Okay. And there are other issues just to complete that's related to Born, for example. These models usually, especially in natural language processing, they are huge. They consume a lot of energy. They are very expensive. They are difficult to train. So probably another field of interest would be to create something more simple, not more complex, but capable of achieving the same performances, hopefully.
Yes, I think there are actually huge opportunities in like doing more with less. So doing like achieving the same classification performances of what you can do with today's models, but with much less computational resources. And also about the biases that you were mentioning, I will not disclose, but there is a Swiss startup which is ranked amongst the most 100 promising startups, which is exactly addressing this kind of issue. So they're trying to setting up an infrastructure to explain biases in machine learning, large learning models before putting them into production. And this may also serve as an auditing system to check before putting in production and having biases that can have a real impact in today's life. So no, I think there are actually huge opportunities today. Yeah.
Thank you. The second question, I think, is almost similar to the first one. It's can AI replace data scientists in the near future? So I think
it's basically the same answer. If I can add something, probably at the very beginning of the era of data science and machine learning and artificial intelligence, there were a lot of opportunities in the deep, in the sense that if you were at that time, if you work on the machine learning, you are a very specialist. Okay, you were super specialized in that stuff, and your attention is in the deep to create something more complex, more effective, and so on. Now the problem is not to do this kind of specialist work, but on the other side, the field is wider. It's not more machine learning 20 years ago was a super nerdy thing that you do if you want to work in that specific area of computer science. Nowadays, it's something that is used almost everywhere. And so the field is wider, okay? So which means basically, I think more opportunities than before. And also that's another part of the answer.
Thank you. The third question is, do AI models understand the world?
I think this is quite interesting because we have a former physics man. It's not physicist because physicist is a doctor, right? and a philosopher. So
Yeah, this is a very tough question. I'm not going to give the answer, but I'm going to link it to the previous question about the potential of data scientists, whether they will be replaced by the machine learning. So in my views, now, today, data scientists are even more important than, I don't know, machine learning engineers. Why? Because all machine learning models in one way or another are trained on some data. So the output that you can expect from these machine learning algorithms are as good as the input data. And so if you are really able to curate the data and the input of the pipeline, you may be able to get, a different, less biased, more efficient, with less parameters, machine learning algorithm in the end. So I believe that as opportunities and work to be done, there is a lot more on the data science side. And this also links to the question whether machine learning understands the world. I would say yes, it understands the data on which it was trained. So as far as the data representative of the outer world, it does understand the world. As far as they are not, it doesn't. And of course, it's like a tautology. But I really believe this is what it is. So if we start giving like a robot or machine learning algorithm or sensors, like for vision, for whatever else, for audio or our senses, then it will start to interact with the environment and potentially understand in a certain way the world, or better understand the environment in which it is in. Then if this is linked to consciousness or I know who I am, I don't know. I will to the philosopher.
I want to ask an adding question on this. Maybe Emanuele can answer then. How far is general artificial intelligence from us? How far in the time? For you, it's not the rise or.
I don't know. I really don't know. I cannot give an answer on
It could
this.
be 10 years, 100 years.
I really don't know. It also depends what you mean with general AI, right? So is it a new species like Homo sapiens power version 2? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm sorry.
First of all, I'm not a philosopher. I got just a degree in philosophy. That's not qualifying me. But my answer to the person who's asking if this model can understand the world, my answer is a question. Do you understand the world? Just ask yourself this question, because the real issue is not if the artificial intelligence understands the world, but what does it mean to understand the world? If the meaning of this sentence is that we can perform complex tasks in a given situation, then yes. If the answer is, do we have an internal knowledge or understanding or feeling of what you're doing? Well, I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I don't think so. Okay, I think that basically it's true that these kind of techniques are more or less very well educated parrots. They can perform some activities starting from the data in a way that emulates very well the activity of humans. But the real thing that I'm really interested in is that we can use these tools to understand a little bit better how we understand the world. Because sometimes these tools provides you, for example, ChatGPT provides you answers that that are new for you. Or if you study the kind of bias they have. Well, these biases comes from the data produced by humans. For example, there are a lot of papers online about the gender biases in natural language processing techniques. There are some examples where you ask GPT to complete the sentence with a profession, And if it's a male, the profession is a very qualified one. If it's a female, the profession it's a less qualified one. But this kind of bias is not in the model, it's in the data. So using that model, we can understand that probably our society is biased. So the point is not if they understand the world, but if we can understand better the world through these technologies. I think it's more interesting, this second question, than the first one.
I know you guys, but I really liked both answers of was really interesting because you could see actually the personality of each of you. So thank you. The third, no, I mean the last question is in Italian. We can try to. It's really a long one actually. In our situation, is important learning Julia, or is it better to focus on other aspects? Okay, and there's like another question, so maybe we can focus on this first one. Learning Julia
In the sense of the programming language.
the programming
Okay.
language.
As I said, yeah, I started in computer science in 2000, more or less. And every year, or almost every year, there was a new technology that was super important to learn. Okay, especially in programming languages. So my answer is it's very important to learn how to program a computer, how to write a good code, how to use the technologies, not that or that other specific one. Julia, by the way, is very nice. Yeah, it's one of the programming languages there is a lot of hype on, but from many years. Yeah, it's nice, but I mean, I don't use it every day, and I'm still here. I can survive. I mean, I don't focus too much on the technologies. That's my message. Focus on the contents.
Yeah, I totally agree. I have nothing to add. So it's important to code and not the programming language itself.
Following this question, so I want to add one more. Python or R? I think I can know the answers, but up to you.
So Python and R. And I say this because I work with both on a daily basis. I use R for some things and Python for some other things. I find R is much, much better or easier for me to write publication code for finance, to produce nice plots, to do, data analysis quickly and quite efficiently today. And I use Python, more for the machine learning research.
I saw someone that was swinging his head.
Yeah, I don't want to answer to this question because, well, I'm not a big fan of R. Okay, guilty as, but it's my personal taste, let's say, in the sense that okay, it's more a matter of what you like than what is really needed. I think that the most important thing is that you build a toolbox. Okay, a toolbox for everything you want to do. So you want to do machine learning, so I will have my toolbox on machine learning. That could be anyone, or for example, as Emanuele was saying, I like very much to create the plots with R. Okay, right, no problem. Or there are some libraries or packages in R that works better or faster, maybe, than in Python. Let's say, why not? Okay, it's not an issue. As I said, it's not an issue of the technology. Don't bind yourself to one technology. Everybody has his own preferences. I like Python very much because it's one of the first languages I learned, programming languages I learned, and that's why. But you can use something else.
But a lot of us started from zero knowledge in both R and Python. Do you think it's meaningful to focus on one language because we are seeing both during our master? So do you think it's meaningful to focus on one language and to develop very well one language of the two maybe? Or is it better and for what reason is it better to learn both on parallel? Maybe not going so deeper in one of.
So for one period in my career, in the very beginning especially, I do this now less than before, but yes, I doing that. I decided to learn a programming language per year. Just not to really learn it, just to scratch the surface, but try to understand how it works. Okay, I studied Java, C++, Objective-C, and so many in this way, Julia or Go. Or, I'm not very good in any of those. I'm just, looking around. But as I said, my final answer is don't try to do this kind of choice. Try to build your toolbox. The toolbox is, first of all, a methodological toolbox, and then also a technical toolbox. And the toolbox could contain a couple of, technologies. For example, a database technology. I think it's really needed. Then one or two programming languages that you prefer over the others, maybe for doing different things, like with R and sorry. And why not a statistical tool? That could be R, I don't know. Also MATLAB can be used for that or whatever.
Yes. So actually, I think there are, lower level and higher level programming languages. And what I think for learning, at least in my experience, it's much better to start from the lowest possible programming language. So if you really have to choose, like during my bachelor, I was studying C++, and then it is very, very easy to go from C, C++ to Python, R, whatever else, because you understand the logic, right? You start to understand how things work, and you're able to go to a higher level very fast. If you do the reverse, so if you start from a very high level language, then it's very difficult to go at lower and lower levels, even because now you have time to study and to really learn things. And later in your career, you won't probably have too much time to do that. So if there is a time to learn, it's now. And I believe the best way to learn now is the lowest possible programming language. Of course, corresponding to the choice of the university degree, and then it's very easy to switch. If you focus only on one, then in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, wherever, you still don't know how to switch from that programming language because you have put so much effort in developing your skills only in that specific programming language that then, as in finance, you typically say you are not well diversified, so you are exposed to a very high risk, right? If the technology then starts to change, then you're in troubles. And I believe that switching and being able to work with different tools, different things, it's much better to have a very, very super specific background on only one.
And to put it down in other terms, let's try not to overfitting the knowledge in one, okay? Because otherwise it's difficult to generalize, as Emanuele was saying.
Okay, I think we answered to all the questions, and we run also out of time. So we would like to thank you, and we would like also to ask you one last question. Always like a weird question, which is, are you okay with putting pineapple on pizza?
I guess it's cheating. Of course, no.
I don't like it, but I'm a very tolerant person. So if someone likes it, why not? There are. Let's say it this way: there are worse things that you can put on pizzas. Okay.
So again, to Prof. Ferrara and Emanuele, I want you guys to ask you an applause for our guests. Of course, if it's something else to ask you to point out, we're free to do it. And otherwise, you're free also to share feedback with us after this. meeting also to build someone better than. And for September, obviously, we need someone to help build this thing, this UnimAI community better. So, job.
That's an interesting question because the answer in Italy and in general in Europe is not so easy because, okay, there are some companies that are super specialized in this kind of stuff. So they are the obvious choice. Okay, so if you go on Google or Meta or Amazon, depends on the division, of course, because, right. But if you go to do machine learning in that places, all right, it's okay. Concerning other companies, it's difficult to answer because sometimes you can find very good jobs and you can do very advanced things also in companies where you don't expect that. Okay, maybe very traditional companies, maybe manufacturing companies, but they are investing a lot in that. So my feeling, at least, is that okay? There are some companies, maybe smaller or middle-sized companies that are very advanced on those topics. For example, we have some of those companies here providing labs and collaborating with our course. Like, for example, Amagama does a lot of interesting things and this stuff, right? But the real issue for me is depends very much on what kind of job you are applying. You can find a job which is very specific on data science, very exciting, and also maybe well paid. Also in companies where you don't expect it. On the opposite, you maybe receive an offer from a company which should work in this field, and maybe the job is not so good because you have to do with the clients and other kind of stuff. Okay, so in my view, it's more important what you are going to do than where you are going to do. That's my personal answer. And also, it's my experience with the ex-students that started working in companies, and their level of satisfaction is always depending on what they do, basically, more than where. Yeah, it's very no. That's more or less. Well, if I had the answer to this question, I would be a rich person nowadays. You know, which will be the next big thing. We don't know. It's my personal expectation is that the big five will be the leading companies for many years now. Okay, because they have the money for investing in these technologies. They have the infrastructure, the expertise, of course, and more importantly, they have the data. Because the real value, the real gold mine is the data. Who has the data? So an interesting stuff. There is a book from Massimo Florio, who is the former director here. The real thing is that if the public administration, for example, the European Commission, can put in value all the data that the public sector has, for example, it could be a big player. But who knows if it will happen before or after, okay? I think will be the leader for many years, but specifically because they have the data. The real asset is the data, you know.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'd ask you another applause to conclude this meeting for our guests and to cheer them. Thank you guys for coming. Reach out soon.